It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Smitty. I'm doing good. It's nice when you kind of know what's coming before you go to bed, and you got everything already written, and then you wake up and it's happening, and you're like, "All right, I got this." So yeah, got the word late last night that this was something that was probably going to go down. Didn't quite get enough of it to feel comfortable reporting it on my own, but definitely was ready to roll when I got the Schefter notification. What was it, about 6:30, 7 o'clock this morning, something like that?
Yeah, like right as I was getting up, I had a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
So had the story ready to go, and yeah, I mean, not something that really surprised me in terms of like the idea of George Pickens getting traded this offseason. The timing, a little bit curious, definitely, sure. And I think definitely brings into question the even greater level of the draft process that we were sort of already questioning, at least on this show. So, yeah, exciting day.
There are episodes where, I mean, literally just even this week where we jump on here and we have a conversation before we even start recording. Just like, hey, what are we going to talk about? And then there's episodes like today where it's like, no questions asked. Hey, we already know what we're talking about. It like you said, 6:30 in the morning. We knew what today's episode was going to be primarily about. George Pickens being traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a 3rd-round pick in the 2026 draft, as well as a 2027 swap where Steelers get a 5th back with a 6th going to the Dallas Cowboys. In terms of the trade, I see a lot of people talking about that aspect of it, and like in a vacuum, that part on its own, because we can talk about the process. We're going to go through each part of this. Just the return itself, I think they got pretty good value, and I think that getting that back is why he wasn't traded during the draft, because it seems like all that was on the table was like a 4th-round pick potentially. They wanted a day 2 pick, even if it meant waiting a year in terms of the draft year that it was going to be getting the pick, and then the pick swap itself going from the 6 to the 5, again just accumulating 2026 2027 capital in future years. I think they got pretty good value here. Obviously, like, it's easy to say this is as good as they were going to do, because otherwise they're not going to make the trade. But what do you make of the value they got?
I think this is probably what they needed to get to make a trade. Like, I would have had a hard time accepting less than this. I think this is okay value. You're obviously selling low on the talent of the player. There's no question about that. But as I wrote at SteelersNow.com today, the Steelers' issues with George were too public and too hard to hide. Like, it's not like Chase Claypool, where like Steelers had a lot of issues with Chase Claypool. I think a lot of them still haven't really gotten out over, like, I think that was more like an internal thing. And this was just too public. It, literally against the Dallas Cowboys is when he decides to wear always effing open, or open effing always. Didn't even get the order of the words right, across his eye black, and then get himself benched for portions of that game against the Cowboys last year, while the Steelers were 3-1 and Pickens is coming off one of the best games of his career in the loss against the Colts. Like, you can't. It's really hard to get good value for a player whose warts are that public, and I think that's what you're seeing here. And I think the fact that the Steelers just absolutely fleeced the Chicago Bears in that Claypool trade has definitely caused other teams to be like, oh, if the Steelers don't want a guy, we don't want him either. Like, it has definitely depressed what they're able to do in the trade market. I think teams are catching on to the fact that if Mike Tomlin has given up on you, you have big problems.
And you mean in general at that position specifically, a wide receiver? You just mean in general, like any player that they?
I mean, I would say any like problematic seeming player, which just seems like it is wide receiver. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think I've said on the show before, like, if the Steelers drafted me at wide receiver, I would just be like, does this mean I'm a jerk? I don't, like, is it me? It just seems like the way things go.
Do I have a lot of talent that I didn't know about, but also am I a jerk?
Yeah.
Also, the other part of it,
that's been the way it's gone.
him being in a contract year, I think plays into why I feel like, this is good value for them to get, given that is the case too.
And apparently they didn't even need to give the Cowboys permission to talk about a contract. That they haven't talked about a contract. So this could very well be a rental of George Pickens for a 3rd round pick plus a pick swap. I think that's a pretty good deal for the Steelers. So yeah.
Well, and with that being the case, that it was, that was apparently a George Pickens thing, like that his team didn't want to, even broach the idea of a contract extension. He wants to play this year out and prove that he can be a number 1 wide receiver, although, he's be playing across from CeeDee Lamb, obviously there and everything like that. But with that being the case, that if he would have been fine playing out this year in Pittsburgh, I think that, crosses another thing off here in terms of trying to figure out exactly why they're not moving forward with this marriage with George Pickens. Like, very clearly it was them just not wanting to deal with him, because if he would have been willing to play out this year, that was something that we had talked about. Like, is there a concern in terms of George Pickens and his side? Like, hey, they're going to make it ugly over the summer because they want a contract extension.
Well, I think when you bring another team into the mix, you provide a lot more clarity for an agent in terms of what the market value for a player is going to be. It is one thing to say the Steelers aren't offering us what we think we're worth. We're going to hold out. There's marginal value to George Pickens in participating in OTAs and minicamp and even training camp. Really, like, he's a really good player. He would be a really good player even if he didn't do any of that. He already knows the Steelers offense, of what of it he chose to participate in anyway. And you could see, even if he was willing to play out the season, he had to. Like, he didn't really have a choice. He didn't have I guess he could have demanded a trade, I guess, but he has to play the year to get to free agency. It's not like Le'Veon Bell where he could just walk away. But I still think even if he ends up playing out the year under the Cowboys, there was still a pretty significant risk of there being big time disruptions for the Steelers in the form of George Pickens and his contract this offseason.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe the change of scenario changes how he feels about that. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. If they decide to pay him, obviously at some point beyond this year, but I want to ask you, in terms of like the entire process here. Now, if you felt like there was any missteps, because to me, this goes back to, I'm not going to say the timeline of trading him, because again, if the value wasn't going to be there the week of the draft before to be able to do it, then so be it. But feeling like this was potentially a direction that they could go. I know I mentioned it, but I mentioned it before George Pickens was traded, obviously, but not taking Ayumanor in the 4th round with him on the board, and instead selecting Jack Sawyer, who could turn out to be a great player. I understand, they thought the value was too good to pass up with him on the board there, but I know that rookie wide receivers, cannot be good right out the jump. We obviously talked about how, Roman last year. But I would feel a lot better, I think, if you had the presence of Ayumanor in this room right now. So to me, if I was looking at just the way that this entire thing played out, if there was a misstep along the way, to me, it was just not selecting a receiver at all in the draft and not necessarily the timeline of when he got traded.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I don't have a problem with the timeline. I don't have a problem with the return being 2026 draft capital. I think that makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. But, they drafted an edge and they didn't need an edge. They drafted a linebacker and they didn't need a linebacker. And, to me, that's the part where I'm like, yeah, that part of the process, I already, even like Dante Kent, that's he was going to get to UDFA. That's an off the board choice in the 7th round. And so, if you didn't like Ayumanor for whatever reason, you got Torrey Holton. You got there were several options there. Jalen Royals from Utah State, who I thought all 3 of those guys were day 2 picks, and they were available in the 4th round. And Tez Johnson, who I don't think is a great fit for the Steelers, but was probably also talked about as a day 2 pick, was there even into the 7th round, I think. And there's other guys in the 7th round, like Isaiah Kanata Mumfield, and all over the board. Like they could have found some more talent at wide receiver in this draft than they did. And I think that was a mistake. I said it during the draft. It definitely is now that they've traded George Pickens. Although I don't think they're like totally stuck in terms of adding to the wide receiver room. Like it is, but like I also don't understand the signing of Robert Woods. Like because if Robert Woods was like, okay, they break glass in case of emergency backup, and George Pickens and DK Metcalfe are going to play every snap at outside receiver if all goes well, that's sort of livable. But like right now, he's wide receiver 2, and that's just that's not livable.
What was it, like two I mean, it was either Monday or Friday of last week when DB was on here. We talked about Robert Woods, and I said, well, at least the good thing is he's playing in a lesser role than we had Van Jefferson and Allen Robinson. And well, right now, if a game's played, he's not. He's in that exact same role that those guys were in. So, yeah, we talked obviously several times from last offseason throughout the course of the season in terms of the process at wide receiver. And I think that there's a fear that the Steelers are right back in that same boat. Just your thought on that. Are they still, obviously we have a lot more time, I guess, right now with this taking place. There's still some guys out there in free agency, a name that actually just got released today in Gabe Davis, maybe somebody available in the trade market. So they can still get themselves out of this and add to this room. But can you understand at least or speak to the notion from the fan base that feel like they're right back to where they were last year?
Well, I don't think they're right back to where they were last year. Two big differences. One, DK Metcalfe is a better player than George Pickens. Period. Did George Pickens have some potential to maybe grow into something more than he'd been? Yes, but compared to what has happened, DK Metcalfe is a better player. Two, they got one signed to a long-term deal that they want to be here, which they did not have when they had George Pickens. I mean, the number one reason George Pickens was traded was the Pittsburgh Steelers did not want George Pickens on their team anymore. Like, they are very happy to have DK Metcalfe. And yeah, is DK Metcalfe also kind of a hothead? Yeah, sure. Has DK Metcalfe ever arrived at a game when he was returning from an injury after warmups? No. I'm still flabbergasted that he was allowed to remain on the team one day after that, to be honest. Like if you want to ask about the timeline, like this is like 6 months.
That is one of those things. That's a perfect example of something that gets downplayed by the fans. I think that is absolutely something that cannot happen.
More egregious than anything Antonio Brown ever did as a Steeler up until the day he refused to play.
Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of people
of Antonio Brown nonsense. That's worse than all of it.
Yeah.
I just like, and so. Yeah, on top of already been fined hundreds of thousands of dollars, on top of being serially late for practices and meetings and things like that. Like that one, you can't minimize how big of a deal that was. And so, yeah, DK Metcalfe certainly can crash out during a game or go off on the sideline or whatever. But I think there's a different level of professionalism they're getting there. It's someone they want to have, and they feel comfortable having a long term. And that's not what they had in George Pickens. So no, I don't think it's even close to the same as it was before. We'll see if it ends up being significantly better or just a little bit better. Like they still have the problem of no one to take pressure away from their number one receiver. That still exists as it stands right now, but it's not the same.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. A lot of good points made in there. I felt the exact same way in terms of, the differences between there being some personality, obviously, between DK Metcalfe and George Pickens. I think that just goes to the point, like a lot of the fan base, they were tolerating a lot of things from George just because I think they were fans, which is completely fine. But, I think we're blinded by a lot of things that were going on internally because of that. But like, I think a really good point made by DB on Twitter today. Unfortunately, this isn't a Friday, so not here to talk about his own points. So I'll bring it up in terms of like everything the Steelers put in front of George Pickens last year to basically say, "Hey, go earn this contract if you want us to pay you." They traded away Deontay Johnson instead of him to break those two up because they know they couldn't be together. Hired Zach Azani, who's like a known like hard ass coach, to be able to deal with him and hopefully get that personality in check. Like, it seemed like they did a lot of very intentional things to say, "Hey, George, if this is what you really want, go out and show us." And he didn't. Like, that did not take place in the level that needed to take place. So now we're in the situation where we are, where they decided we're going to go get this guy that we didn't draft from outside of our building and pay him instead.
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways things got worse with Pickens last year. And so like not better. And so like it was never, I don't think it was ever a real consideration that they were going to sign him to a long-term contract.
This
not
isn't
this
necessarily
not this offseason.
Oh, sure.
Certainly
Absolutely.
wasn't going to happen.
Look, I didn't necessarily have this on the ledger here with it in terms of subtopics of the George Pickens thing to talk about, but I just mentioned Zach Azani in there and put something on my mind. Do you feel like that hire now, like, because we talked about it, like how much of that hire was strictly due to George? Like, do you feel like that hire was now a failure because of the way things didn't happen or happened or didn't happen with George? And do you expect like this tenure to continue? What's your thought there?
Well, let's see how Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson do. I mean, I think the pressure's on for those guys individually and for Azani that they're going to have to perform now. Roman Wilson, especially, man, his 3rd round pick, not a great rookie year. Injuries happen, but also like it wasn't just injuries, right? We were talking about him not looking great in minicamp, like he, and then obviously there was some stuff about the playbook, which I think actually ended up being overblown, but like it was more about just he wasn't in a position where he could help the team. And that's not really want from a day 2 draft pick. Hopefully he can. I think he's a good player. I think he was a good pick. So he's got to show something this year. Calvin Austin's going to continue to get opportunities. We'll see if Zach Azani can earn that spot. But I don't think there's a lot that can be said about what happened in 2024 that points to him having done so right now.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of internal options you obviously just brought up there that could take on an elevated role, but somebody that's not on the roster right now, who we talked about, not necessarily at the price point that he was making, but how good of a fit he would have been. Gabe Davis, who was with the Jacksonville Jaguars, just released. My take on Gabe Davis, like, I'm not saying he's necessarily a bad player, but I think he is a better fit than player. Like, if that makes sense. I think for the Steelers specifically, it's such a good fit that even if I don't think he can do like everything that you would want from an outside receiver, I think he kind of makes up for that because of how good of a scheme fit that he would be. I know that we've had conversations about Gabe Davis before. I think it makes a ton of sense. What's your thought on him?
Yeah, I think he's a perfect fit for what Arthur Smith's trying to do. Like, it seems like a tailor-made Arthur Smith wide receiver 2. He's a big body. He can block. He's good vertically. He works good in condensed splits. Not a great route runner, but and frankly, like borderline bad hands. But like, I mean, that's they're throwing a lot of like low percentage passes anyway. I think it's a really good fit for their scheme. I think people are really confused about how good Gabe Davis was in Buffalo. I put out the tweet that Jacksonville would come, and I was like, yeah, that'd be perfect for the Steelers. And there's a lot of people like, oh, what you're talking about? I'm like, what? Gabe Davis was awesome. 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns over 2 years as a wide receiver 2. Like, that's what more are you looking for? And also will be signing for the minimum because he's got the Russell Wilson situation where the Jaguars have an offset that he has to. So, like, I don't know what else you could want. I mean, I think they're going to have a hard time getting him, but like other than that, like
I could see him going back to Buffalo, to be honest.
Sure. I mean, if I was Gabe Davis, I think I'd rather go catch balls from Josh Allen, try to win a Super Bowl. Yeah, absolutely. But like, if for whatever reason that's not an option, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Steelers should be beating his door down. Like, it's hard to imagine them getting a better wide receiver than him at this juncture as a free agent, just sitting there for nothing other than a very small amount of cash.
Like, some of the replies I was getting, I was like, are you guys thinking of the same player? Like, people were talking about him like being over the hill best year. I'm like, this dude's 26.
Yeah.
Who are we talking
and
about?
he was 26 and he was like a sleeper prospect. He didn't really play until his third year in the league. Like, so he's 26, but he was really only had like 2 full years as a starter in Buffalo. And then last year,
low mileage 26.
Yeah, last year, like dealt with some injury, had a knee injury, tried to play through it. Then the Jaguars season went to hell in a handbasket, catching balls from Mac Jones, decides to get his surgery on his meniscus and get out of there. But like, man, there's a reason that he was worth that contract that he got last year. Like that, he's a good player. That'd be a pretty good fit for the Steelers.
That's why I said, like, for his what he doesn't do in terms of the route running, can't run everything on the tree, and obviously the hands inconsistency. I think what he does do are things that get accentuated within Arthur Smith's offense. And again, not asking to be a number one option, so I would certainly be on board with it.
Yeah, another player we were talking about when we were discussing like things that could happen with George Pickens, when we were talking about maybe a trade with the Packers and Dontavian Wicks, another guy who also has just bad hands, right? He might have the worst hands in the league, but like a very different player, right? Dontavian Wicks is this like sort of twitched up elite separator, but like I look at those two guys and I'm like, I think Dontavian Wicks is the player that I am more excited about as a watcher of football, but Gabe Davis is a better fit for what Arthur Smith is trying to do.
I mean, I would even say like another, like Romeo Doubs, if you were taking a Packers receiver, might be a better fit.
Sure. No question. Romeo Doubs would be a better fit.
Yeah.
I think Romeo Doubs is a better player too. I mean, it's not out of the line of possibility that one of those Packers wide receivers could be available. Like they're now pretty deep, having added Matthew Golden there. We'll see if the Steelers can pry one of them out with one of these extra picks they've got in a trade. I think I don't get the sense that they're done at wide receiver.
With that being said, another name that we haven't talked about, but I feel like we have to just because of the Aaron Rodgers conversation, whether it is a Packers receiver that's there. He had worked with Romeo Doubs, actually spoke very glowingly about him, even though it was just a brief stint. Obviously, expanded repertoire with Alan Lazard of the New York Jets. He posted a couple different gifts today with stuff leaking and stuff like that. I honestly didn't know how to read into those. Was he saying he wasn't leaving, or like I was
I wasn't even sure about that. That clip is usually about not leaving, but also like he's barely been in New York. I don't know.
But it also wasn't the full clip. Like I saw people replying and saying like in that clip, it actually says I'm leaving. Like it's like a condensed version of the same clip. So I don't know what he was trying to say. I was wondering if we were getting news like, hey, they worked out a restructured contract and he's staying, or no, he's definitely going to be on his way out. But in terms of Alan Lazard, what do you make of him as a player at this point? I mean, I would certainly rather have Gabe Davis than Alan Lazard at this point. I'm not sure if Aaron Rodgers would share that sentiment, but what do you make of him?
Well, he's something the Steelers didn't have until they like signed Robert Woods. I feel like there is a lot of, I mean, Alan Lazard is bigger. He's 6'5". He's probably, he's almost definitely still faster. But he is like that sort of big slot. He's a different kind of big slot. He's not as like a physical guy, but like I don't know. I feel like there's a good amount of duplication there, and he can play outside, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the slot transition. I thought, at least over the last couple seasons, once Devontae Adams got to New York, especially, obviously they had Garrett Wilson there. I felt like that was more so, him kind of being pigeonholed into that spot because of what else was on the roster. Because I don't think he was playing as much nearly in the slot when he was in Green Bay prior to that. I think it was more a way that the roster was constructed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. He's interesting enough that I think I'd rather have Gabe Davis, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, he had production last year. I mean, over 500 yards, 6 touchdowns, better than Woods. Like that's
6. I didn't know he had 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Wonder how many of those came in that last 4-week stretch that we're talking about with Aaron Rodgers playing some really good ball.
No, actually, his were all early before Devontae Adams got there, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that would make sense. All right, I got a couple questions in my DMs here that are related to the George Pickens stuff. I actually really like this one from Peasus, Dog from Springfield. Always enjoy getting to read this name. I'm sure both you and Alan will be bombarded with questions relating the GP trade. Bet this topic will get brought up regardless, but what do we think the front office views of the current state of the team? My read is that they believe their core is strong enough to try and thread the needle here with a 26 quarterback for a 2 to 3 year window. See a lot of people saying that trading GP means that they're rebuilding, but I'm not necessarily of that belief. I think them trading GP was solely a GP issue, and they don't want to rebuild. One of y'all's thoughts on this, whether this is the right move or not. It's just my read on things.
I think that was a really, really well thought out comment. No, the Steelers are not rebuilding. You know they're not rebuilding because their name is the Pittsburgh Steelers and they don't believe in it. They're never going to do it. Ever, ever, ever. Stop asking. The people involved do not have any desire to do that. They're not doing that. This is all just about not wanting to deal with George Pickens anymore and finally having someone meet what they felt like was a fair asking price to unload him. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. Like, I appreciate the talent that George Pickens was, but I don't know that I can get on board with the thought process that I see from a lot of people thinking this is some like massive move that shifts what they are in 2025. Like, they certainly aren't as good at the wide receiver position right now, and certainly I don't think, regardless of if Gabe Davis, somebody outside, aren't going to be as good, but like, it's not some massive shift from where they would be. And I think, odds or whatever in terms of that, like betting odds or whatever, those lines, but like, I think that that's reflective in that those odds have not really shifted at all in terms of what they view this team as.
Yeah, slightly less likely to win the Super Bowl, but just as likely to make the playoffs, and the win total still right at 8.5. Like, that tells you that the collective analysis of the gambling population was about how much George Pickens really meant to the Steelers. And I think that's very fair. And so I think the Steelers think they'll be better without him. I'm not saying I subscribe to that notion, but I think right now, if you hooked up some members of the front office to lie detector test, they would tell you the Pittsburgh Steelers got better today because they don't have George Pickens anymore.
Is that a belief in maybe over belief in just obviously the talent matters, but if they feel like they're going to be a more collective group without him, they value that as opposed to
I think it's about being realistic about what you are, right? Like, okay, the Steelers do not have the talent to be a real Super Bowl contender. Now they're going to try, and I'm not saying they shouldn't try, but like, if most of your eggs are in the building for the future basket, do you really want a guy who's a pain in the butt to be around be a part of that? Like, what's the point for one more year? Like, they weren't signing him to a contract extension. They have him for one more year. So it's like, okay, if we have an 11% chance of winning the Super Bowl with George Pickens and a 10% chance of winning it without him, but also our locker room gets along a lot better and we can actually focus on developing our young players the way we want to, and we don't have to deal with all these headaches, it's only 1%. Like, I think that's the appropriate way to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I definitely like it. You got to be able to play, right? But like, I'm definitely a big believer in camaraderie and
start Ben Skoranek instead. Like, that's not going to work.
Yeah,
love Ben. That's not going to work. But like, I think they can get most of George Pickens' production from someone that's currently not on the roster right now, and I think they'll get a good look at Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin, see if they can continue to grow. And I don't think this changes anything about the big picture direction of the team at all. George Pickens was not part of that. It never was going to be, and this is just the exit ramp.
You said you feel like still there's an addition to be made here. Obviously, again, I don't want to compare this year to last year, but we had the conversation how many times on here, just for the sake of asking, say there's not. Say this is the wide receiver room that they go into the season with. Then in your mind, does it become a failure?
It's a missed opportunity. I mean, the draft alone was a missed opportunity. So yeah. They should sign someone or trade for someone. And if they don't, I'll be saying they should have. But we'll see how things go. I mean, I think there's still a good number of options out there. Brandon Ayuk, I wouldn't totally rule it out. Like, I think that's something that
another summer doing it. Yeah. Well, but like the whole conversation with him, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not a contract guru cap guy here, but I thought the whole conversation with that was like it needed to happen before
So
the
San
start of the new
Francisco
league
would
year.
have to eat like a huge dead cap hit right now on this year's.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
they already paid him like 20, I think it's like 25 or 26 million for this season that
Mhm.
like they would then have to add to the dead cap. So like if you go look at like over the cap or whatever, and you see like, oh, he'll be cut if if he gets cut, this year, this team owes this team owes that. But like the timing of when those things pay out is not always clear. So the 49ers already paid him that money, so that has to stay with them. So it's definitely a lot less beneficial for them to trade him now, but I don't know. We'll see.
So is that like, I mean, if that's already paid out, is it a good at least for this season? Is it
Oh,
like
the
a
Steelers would get him for like a little over $1 million for 25 if they traded for him right now.
okay? But then you're
And then
obviously
they'd have a
inheriting.
fully guaranteed like 27 million and 26, and then there would be 2 years of big salary that are not guaranteed after that.
Okay.
So it's
I mean,
I think it's fairly reasonable
yeah. Yeah.
if
If Brandon Ayuk comes back and is the same player that he was in 23 before getting hurt, I mean, that's an awesome contract to take, especially with the way that you're starting to see receivers get paid. I understand that right now it looks not great, the contract that he signed, because he tore his ACL pretty much right away and how everything played out. But I don't know. I mean, if he comes back and looks like the same player he was pre-injury, I think that that's a pretty palatable contract.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and then real quick, the last thing here, just because I know that this was a conversation that we had already had, but my guy Seabass here said, question for the podcast. Do you guys feel like it was potentially pointless to trade Pickens at this juncture? More than likely going to get a comp pick with a contract that he signed. We didn't draft a wide receiver like A.O. Maynor to replace him potentially. And now if they do, you have to look. And now if they do want to if they want to get a look at Howard, you're giving him same opportunities to see that we've been having with the lack of talent outside of one guy. Love the show. Keep it up.
Yeah, a couple things there. I'll start with the Howard thing. I don't think the Steelers have any intention of getting a look at Howard this year. I think they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to be their starting quarterback. And if not, it's going to be Mason Rudolph. I don't think trying to get a look at a 6th-round pick is something that is high on their to-do list at all. If they want Will Howard to start, it'll be in a couple of years. About the comp pick thing, look, you can't do that every year because every free agent you sign takes away from a comp pick. Like the Steelers had a fairly underwhelming free agency this year. One of the reasons is because they were trying to maximize their comp pick return for the guys that had going out. But they had this weird situation where they drafted tackles in first round 2 years in a row. So they had their starting left tackle who they were going to let walk. They had 2 quarterbacks on expiring contracts that they were going to let walk. So they had this weirdly high group of expensive contracts going out that they were like, we could do this. We could maximize this year. And that's why they signed Darius Slay and targeted Aaron Rodgers and did these things to so they don't have offsets. But you're really handicapping yourself in free agency by doing that. And so if the Steelers go out there next offseason and what's the position that look like? Isaac Seumalo is out of his contract, and the Steelers are like, you know what? We just really want to go and nail that last spot on this offensive line. Let's go get the top guard in free agency. Well, there goes your comp pick. You just get, let's say they go out in free agency, and I don't even know who's available at wide receiver next offseason, but they just decide, okay, we're just gonna clear up this wide receiver thing right now. Let's go get the ideal wide receiver 2 to pair with DK Metcalfe. Then there goes your comp pick. Also, if you try to play Pickens this year and he is miserable and causes a bunch of problems and reduces his value, then the comp pick's not everyone's like, oh, they'll get a 3rd for George. Maybe they only got a 3rd in a trade for George. Does that are people going to sign someone to a $30 million a year contract that they're only trading a 3rd round pick for? Clearly the league is questionable about what George Pickens' value is. So if he goes out and has a bad year because he's unhappy or causes a whole bunch more problems, which we know is possible, then you're probably not looking at a 3rd round comp pick. Maybe you're looking at a 4th or 5th or 6th, or maybe no comp pick at all. I mean, look at Deontay Johnson. I think everybody would have thought Deontay Johnson was going to be a comp pick player for the Carolina Panthers. In fact, one of the reasons the Ravens traded him was to get a comp pick for him. And then he's, after draft signing for the veteran minimum. So, like, there's no guarantee of getting that comp pick. Like, that is a low percentage chance play this far out. And I think they definitely, between those two options, I think this was the right move.
Just real quick, two names that I saw as I was like looking for 2026 free agent wide receivers, and two names that have been talked about quite a bit on here going back to last offseason in the search for a receiver. That's Cortland Sutton and Jacoby Myers, both free agents after this upcoming season.
There you go. There's a couple cut candidates out there too that have like big contracts coming up. Kendrick Bourne, maybe. I think his contract goes way up. I will say one last thing I want to mention, Smitty. The Steelers have not made this trade official yet. They haven't like tweeted out and announced it. And that's because Pickens has not gone to Dallas to wrap up his physical. That's like the last thing that has to happen. The Cowboys went ahead and announced it. And teams do that. Teams do that often. Exactly. They'll announce it before the physical. But like, wouldn't it be the most George Pickens thing ever to like not show up for his physical and like drag this process on even longer? Like,
he'll get to it when he gets to it.
Yeah. Be late to be traded because he's being traded for being late. That would be very on brand. So maybe we'll talk about George Pickens again tomorrow.
George. It's been a ride, pal. Going to Dallas, and we'll see how things play out for him there. Just from a talent standpoint, though, him and CeeDee Lamb, it's a nice duo to have if they can make it work.
No excuses for Dak.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, good stuff.
No running game thing.
Well, yeah. I really expected they were going to add up. Who did they draft a running back? If they did, it wasn't nearly as early as I thought they were going to.
Did they get Blue?
Okay, yeah, staying in Texas. But anyways, all right, good stuff, Alan. As always, before we get out of here, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account. SteelersNow.com. Go there and read the words. There's all kinds of good stuff. A long breakdown of that comp pick discussion. My column about just the Steelers being done with George Pickens and that being the driving force of this, plus a whole bunch of news stories up there from the whole Steelers Now team. And I really appreciate all of you who subscribe to SN Plus and are reading ad-free. And we'll definitely now get a subs only live stream going here maybe early next week. Stay tuned for that. And then, of course, you can like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. That's free. Definitely really helps us out, helps us grow our viewership on this platform, and we really appreciate it. So, do that. And we are at this is another interesting number here. This is difficult. 15,649. I think 49 might be one of the worst numbers, 0 to 99 to wear if you're a football player. So that's tough. I'm going to go with everybody's favorite Magic player, Cassius Marsh.
I was just say, I remember that was a discussion we had this not that long ago. I don't know, maybe a couple weeks, but I had in my head, I was like, okay, if this number comes up again, I'm shouting out Shaw McHugh. So that's who I'm going to go with.
All right. And of course, Jeremiah Moon, the current 49 man.
Yep. Also, Dallas Cowboys actually drafted 2 running backs. You're right about Jaden Blue. They also drafted your boy Phil Maffa.
Oh yeah, from Clemson. Oh, that's a nice little thunder and lightning group there. Okay, maybe they can run.
TBD, we will see. But yeah, as Alan said, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Also, drop us some comments, your thoughts on anything that we talked about today, how you feel about the George Pickens trade. Let us know for sure. And then also get some questions our way for a future episode. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. You'll find us. Do the same thing over on TikTok, and then search my name, Zachary Smith PGH, on all socials to find me. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.